Hey, so I'm back. Let's explain. First order of business, let's explain why I started doing a deep dive investigation of presuppositional apologetics. And if you are an evidentiary apologist listening to this, there shouldn't be clear distinctions between evidentiary apologetics and presuppositional apologetics. They're of the same house. They're the same idea. The reason why I started investigating was because evidentiary apologetics only gets you so far. Two key reasons, and they're important. First, the thing that you are trying to evidence for stands outside of the purview of empirical investigation, supernatural, outside of the natural. Second, and more important, you are dealing with someone whose presuppositions are making your task 50,000 times harder than it need to be. Heavily embedded into the worldview, the paradigm of reality of almost every atheist is the proposition the supernatural does not occur. That's key. You got to weaken their resolve in that proposition before you even start the project. Why they even tell you straight up, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Have you heard them say that? Have they said that? Am I making that up? Okay, so they're already telling you right out of the gate, God exists, you say. That's an extraordinary claim, Craig. No, it isn't. It's a mundane claim being believed by most people throughout the course of history. A huge majority of the world population throughout the course of history. How can you call that extraordinary? I do. Why? Presupposition, your worldview, your paradigm of reality. Supernatural does not occur. That's what they say. And here's the part that makes it really interesting. Atheists get all excited when they see that most people are turning into nons, or a huge bunch of people are turning into nons. Shouldn't get excited, atheists. Why? Nons are not atheists, and nor will they ever become them. Why are they not? Because they have had supernatural experiences that they refuse to write off. Now, here's the kicker. Atheists have had supernatural experiences too. I used to think that was the difference, that atheists didn't experience anything supernatural. Now I find out that they have, for the most part, just as many as the nons. The difference is they immediately write them off. They look for ways to rationalize them away rather than experience them. Case in point, this is mildly related. Shannon Q was on she was doing a line by herself. She's a good personality. She's really nice with people, by the way. Noticed that while she was doing it. But some guy calls up an atheist who had a near-death experience. I'm like, bah! Atheist had a near-death experience. Has a lot of trouble shaking it off. Shannon immediately explained it away by saying, well, here's how you explain a near-death experience. Proteins hit the brain, releases DMT, and you have some form of hallucination. I'm listening to her like, okay, well, that explains the physiological process. Supernatural doesn't mean super alone without any natural connection. You explain how it's connected to the natural, but you didn't explain it away. If there's a piece of chocolate cake on a table, how do I see that chocolate cake? How do I experience it inside myself? Same way. Protons released in my brain chemistry firings. Same way you experience. So is there therefore now no cake? No, of course not. Everything the external world that I experienced as a drug internally, just like the near-death experience. The guy was talking about like seeing his family or something and having trouble shaking the experience off. So Shannon gave him a natural explanation for the phenomena that she thinks automatically rules out the supernatural. Doesn't do that at all. It just explains how he experienced the potentially supernatural experience. She stepped on the lead. The real lead is atheist, has a near-death experience, literally proving that they happen. The reason why people discount Ibn Alexander is they don't believe that he started out as an atheist. He talks about this really vivid near-death experience. This guy talked about a pretty vivid one too. And then Shannon gave him the brain chemistry reasons how he's experienced it, which I agree are the reasons, but that doesn't rule out the impressions that it made on him at all. It's not even close. Why does she think it does? Presuppositions. Every atheist. Most atheists have had supernatural experiences. I promise you, they've had almost as many as nons. The difference is they immediately look for ways to write them off. Camille Greger, pretty smart guy, actually came right out and said it in one stream. He said, I've had at least 5 or 6 experiences that you could easily count as supernatural, but they don't fit into my paradigm of reality, so I don't count them as supernatural. So atheists have the experiences too, then tell you there's no evidence for things they've directly experienced, because they've downgraded the actual thing that happened to them. If you're an atheist, do this own check on yourself. First of all, if you want to weaken you should have done this a long time ago. There's ample evidence out there for supernatural occurrences. Maybe they don't match with Christian theology all the time, but there's ample evidence for them. So much so that it'd be really easy for you to weaken your own resolve in the proposition the supernatural does not occur. It should have already happened. Why? When I first became a Christian, when I first started doing apologetics and I came into this territory, the first thing I started doing was looking for the strongest atheist arguments out there. Went to Dillahunty, Scott Clifton, Alex Malpass, Graham Oppie, Paul Draper, whoever. The name isn't on the list. You know, if I heard that they were the one to see, they were the one to watch, they were the strongest out there, I went to them. So you should have already been looking at the strongest possible supernatural claims out there. Why? To weaken your resolve. Now, most atheists haven't done that. So what do? We go to presuppositional apologetics. Get inside their head, rattle their cage on purpose. The reason why atheists started out, when this thing started out about 10, 15 years ago, atheists were winning and winning by a lot. Why? First of all, the target audience was easy territory, fundamentalist Christianity. Fundamentalist Christianity goes on a paradigm. These 10 things about Christianity are true, they're synonymous with Christianity, and they're true come hell or high water. So the Bible's inerrant. If one little tittle is proved wrong, God doesn't exist. That's literally what they train the kids to believe. That's why they get so rigid and ideological, but it has a fatal flaw. What? If somebody gets it, it's really easy to get inside your head, rattle your cage. Why? You just, 10 propositions that are true come hell or high water, pick the 2 that are the least easy to defend. You got them. You won. You get inside their head, rattle their cage. That's how atheists have been doing it the whole time. There's almost no such thing as an atheist argument against the existence of God. Very few of what they call arguments against the existence of God actually deal with the ontological status of God. The ones that they cite as the most important and the strongest justifications for atheism usually have almost nothing to do with it. Give you a case in point. Rationality Rules was analyzing Drew's thing about arguments, and he said the strongest atheist arguments, justifications for the atheist position. He said these 5. I didn't give them to him. The only one he left out was challenging scriptures in the Old Testament. These were his 5. The Rithropro dilemma, problem of evil. That's the only one that is mildly related to the ontological status of God. Need not be, but that's how atheists use it. It's more about the character of God. This terrible thing is happening to these poor, starving kids in Africa. Why does a good God allow it? It's usually more about the character of God than the ontological status. But that has somewhat related to the ontological status, or at least can be fashioned into an argument. The rest of them, these are the ones he said: the Rithropro dilemma, problem of hell, iteration of Christianity, has nothing to do with the ontological status. Contradictions in the Bible, irrelevant to the ontological status of God. Weak evidence for the resurrection. All 4 of those are completely irrelevant to the ontological status of God. Why does he not know that? Because almost all atheist arguments are like that. They're what I call sleight of hand school of counter-apologetics. Here is something that has nothing to do with the ontological status of God. Let me present it to you. The Christian's going to get inside your head, rattle your cage. How do you handle the cognitive dissonance? I don't. There is no cognitive dissonance. There is cognitive dissonance if you're a fundamentalist Christian on some of them. Contradiction in the Bible, that'll throw a fundamentalist Christian. Why? Because they stake their claim on Bible's inerrant. And if one tittle comes under doubt, then my whole Christianity falls apart. They literally train you to think that. Okay, that's really dumb. Why? Because some of it's hard to justify as inerrant. As I've said, the Bible may be inerrant, but some of the contradictions are hard to reconcile. And atheists are usually going to win that argument. Why? For everyone you justify meaningfully. I brought this up in another video, and I talked about Elisha and the bears, and then immediately I think Jay from England was telling me there are really good justifications for Elisha and the bears. And I saw some of them, they're decent. I forget the gist of it. They weren't kids, they were prophets, and I don't know, there's some sort of deeper theological significance to the whole thing that it made sense to me, but you're still going to lose the debate. Why? Because they'll just move to another one. Kill the witch. Pick up sticks. If someone picks up sticks on Sunday, stone them. They'll move to that one. How are you going to justify that one? Okay, you're gonna look like you're either minimizing atrocities or not clearly acknowledging what the text says. That's the only way that debate goes down. I'm not saying the Bible is not inerrant. I'm saying it's really hard to justify. It might not be, it may be, but it's really hard to publicly defend. It's a virtually indefensible position. So you shouldn't be doing it. Why? Because you're helping the atheists. Because they do, what they constantly do is sleight of hand counter apologetics. Look, this Christian is struggling to reconcile the contradictions in the scripture. Nobody seems to notice that has nothing to do with the ontological status of God. And they go, look, he's struggling to reconcile. Therefore, Christianity is false. Therefore, God does not exist. They truck in inferences that don't automatically apply. Sleight of hand school of counter apologetics. Almost all counter apologetics are that. Almost all counter apologetics are that. I promise. Go investigate. The guy who had the 30 arguments against the existence of God, I watched about 15 minutes of it, turned it off. I was like, this is absurd. Not a single argument against the existence of God. Nothing to do with the ontological status of God at all. Why didn't he notice that? He's not a very good critical thinker, honestly. Starts talking about, if a Hindu somewhere doesn't believe in God, he's going to be sent, he's something like, it's all iterations of Christianity. A Hindu somewhere doesn't believe in God, he's going to be sentenced to hell for not believing in God. That's not fair. Yeah, that doesn't seem fair. That's why I don't believe that. You're not allowed to do that, Craig. That's why I don't think that's true. Somebody literally said that to him while he was presenting this as an argument against the existence of God. It's like, okay, but most Christians believe that. That's got nothing to do with anything. It's not an argument against an ontology at all. You point that out to an atheist and they'll struggle to, they'll start experiencing cognitive dissonance. I did that with on Twitter a month ago. I started pointing out that they pretend like the confusion of different, they can't all be right, but they can all be wrong. They pretend that is an argument against the existence of God. No, it's not. It's an argument against, it's the cacophony of different worldviews and different ideas about religion is not an argument against the existence of God at all. It's not even close. First of all, it's not true. If you actually investigate comparative religion, you'll find the opposite, that there's a lot of overlapping ideas, overlapping trends, overlapping themes. Really, obviously, that's the first thing you'll find out. Take the example I always use, take humility. Almost every religion teaches you the value of humility. Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, I'm probably even Islam. It's the only one I'm not sure does, but my guess is they do somewhere. And some of the like, maybe not in the Quran itself, but some of the commentaries on the Quran, I'm almost sure they do. So it's not true. It's not true. There aren't, and even if it were true, as I tried to point out, and I got into this debate on Twitter, because atheists can't even process this correctly. Why? Because they are so used to making fake, stupid arguments that have nothing to do with the ontological status of God, that if you point out that this has nothing to do with the ontological status of God, they can't even process that. They go, yes, it does, and then they start pointing to a theological construct of Christianity. Go, dude, that's exactly the point. You're arguing against a theological construct, not against an ontology. Wake up. And they don't get it. Relief belief. I spent 2 days debating with him. They left the conversation without getting it at all. I said on the example I used, which I think is a really clear example, and when the Titanic broke, okay, there was people looking from the lifeboats. All of them had a different interpretation. Some people thought that the ship snapped in two, then sunk. Some people thought it just sunk. These are people who watched the event. Now, my only point, and it's a really, really irresolute, completely inarguable point, was that whatever they believed was irrelevant to what actually happened. One of those two things happened. And it doesn't matter who believed more of which. They both had different, people who actually saw it differently. Therefore, belief, my only point, is irrelevant to what? To the ontological status of an event. It's totally irrelevant, doesn't influence at all. That's a very easy to understand point. Relief with belief couldn't understand it. Why? Because he's so used to making fake arguments against God. No, you Christians believe X, and that proves God doesn't exist. It has nothing to do with that. We might be wrong in believing X. That doesn't mean God doesn't exist. It has nothing to do with the ontological status of God. Didn't say that all that clearly. It's a really simple concept to understand. I shouldn't have to say that. The reason why I have to say this is because atheists have made such a mishmash of that, Why? Because they're terrible at critical thinking. Honestly, it's really critical thinking number one. You should be asking yourself, is this actually an argument against an ontology? Or is it an argument against a certain iteration of Christianity? 99 times out of 100, it'll be an argument against an iteration of Christianity. Old Testament scriptures, challenging Old Testament scriptures. What's that got to do with the ontological status of God? Literally nothing. Literally zero. God can exist, and there can be challenging scriptures in the Old Testament at the exact same time. That should be the most obvious thing to a critical thinker, step one. So you should have stopped using those arguments 5 years ago. Why? Because God can exist and there can be the reason why they use them is because they're effective. Why? Because to a Christian who's doesn't know better, you get inside their head, rattle their cage. Particularly a fundamentalist. They're effective against a fundamentalist. If he thinks that the Bible is inerrant, which it may be, but if he thinks that that's absolutely essential to being a Christian, and then you go, here's a challenging scripture in the Old Testament, now it's going to rattle his cage. That's why they win these things. Because they get inside your head and rattle your cage, and you don't notice. You don't notice. If you're someone who's been rattled by atheists, you don't notice. Examine the thing that's rattling your cage and ask yourself a really important question. Does this have anything to do with the ontological status of God? The answer will almost routinely be no. The answer will almost routinely be no. No, it doesn't. The rare exception is, problem of evil. So it can be made to argue, but even there, it's not that strong. It's more about the character of God. As I said, I've had, what I consider powerful and compelling and really vivid religious experiences for the last 15 years. How are you going to argue to me that those aren't real? How are you going to prove to me that those aren't real? None of those things will ever get near me. Why? Because they're predicated on my actual experience. They're not predicated on, Moses didn't exist, Craig. Maybe. I don't know. Oh, the Exodus didn't happen. I have no idea. Maybe not. My belief in God is not predicated on anything about the Bible at all. Therefore, you cannot rattle my cage using the scriptures. And shouldn't be able to rattle anybody's cage, honestly. Why? Because it's irrelevant to the ontological status of God. Moving right along. So, what do? We move on to presuppositional apologetics. Why? Because we have to go on the offense to weaken, if they aren't going to investigate supernatural claims, which they aren't, and when they do, they look for easy outs. They investigate the ones that are easy to shrug off. Routinely, when ask atheists about supernatural claims, they've got 5 that are really implausible that they'll go to right away, and that they have mysteriously investigated, and they'll ignore the ones that are hard to shake off. Routinely. And they'll have easy outs, easy explanations that don't actually explain in a way the atheist will just insist that it does. Why? Worldview. In their worldview, the supernatural does not occur. So you've got to get at that worldview first. You've got to go on the offense. Now, the caveat is if there's a cool atheist, and there's plenty of them who aren't looking, the Answers from Reason crew, I always cite them, but look at the conversation I had with Dave Rollins last week. Started talking about Troll. Pretty good, decent. We started having this fun conversation on Twitter about Troll, and then Ron shows up and tells us that we have to see the original Old Boy, the Korean version. I accept that, but it's not streaming for free, and I ain't paying for it, so I gotta wait for it to stream for free. No, I absolutely refuse to pay for something on streaming when they got 5,000 free movies. My wife will get mad at me. You paid $5 for this? We have 50,000 free movies? Well, it's the Korean version. It's the one Ron said I got to see. Now, there's the American version on Netflix, and I guess I shouldn't even bother with. But we had a fun conversation, Christians and atheists. Okay, that's a better witness than anything else. And if the atheist is cool and reasonable, there's no reason to run arguments with them at all. Just have a conversation about what? About whatever. About cool movies. What else did he say? He said, watch Troll. Troll was pretty fun. It was good. And I think I mentioned All Quiet on the Western Front. It's okay. I was a little disappointed in it. Battle scenes are fantastic. But anyways, okay, so if the atheist is a cool, normal person who just happens to be an atheist, there's no reason to run an argument on them at all. The arguments are for the Pine Creek Doug, the evangelical atheist. The guy who is literally going out of his way to find Christians, get inside their head and rattle their cage. That's what he does on a daily basis. First of all, that shows very, 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 very strong lack of confidence in his own position. Why? You see me doing that? Do you see me going? I just told you to do the opposite. I said, if an atheist is just an atheist and they're not evangelical about it, they're not in your face about it, what do? You have a normal conversation about whatever. Why? Is a better witness? You're planting seeds. What seeds are you planting? Craig Reed is such an awesome guy. He's got great taste in movies. And he's really good looking. How does he maintain his good looks after 50? That's the seed I planted. I promise. He's really handsome. Did you see the picture of him and his wife? He's better looking. No, he's not. She's better looking than I am. That's for sure. I'm the brains. She's the beauty. And she's even smarter than I am sometimes. So I'm neither. How about that? I'm neither of the two. I'm the sad, sorry excuse for a husband. Okay, so am I running out of time? I start to have fun. I start to ramble. Let's see. 20 minutes. Okay, I'll try to get to presuppositions. So, presuppositional apologetics. You got to get inside the head of the atheist, rattle their cage, weaken their confidence in their own worldview. Most of the atheists, the debate me bro atheists, are wildly overconfident. Why? They didn't get the memo. Materialism, naturalism, reductionism is under assault. Bang, step one. Step two, scientism is utterly false. That's where their confidence comes from. Why are they so confident? Because that's what our culture teaches you is the truth. That's what our culture teaches every one of us, including me, is the truth. That's what we learned growing up. Unless you went to Christian high school or a Christian homeschool, that's what you learned. Scientism and materialism are the facts of the matter. Those are the underlying worldviews. It's only when you start really deeply investigating that you find them really, really suspect and borderline incoherent. And that's where presuppositional apologetics comes in. Now, step one. First thing, if you are an atheist listening to this, you probably don't know the good presuppositional arguments. When I start talking about it on Twitter, I usually get an army of debate me bros who tell me, oh, it's such crap, and then they misrepresent. They're probably not misrepresenting because there's a lot of bad versions of these out there. Okay, everyone knows Darth Dawkins. It's more like a gimmick in his hands, like, how do you justify your atheist worldview? He did that debate with Shannon, and, she was cool. Shannon held her peace through most of the debate. That's a victory for civility. She was pretty cool. She handled him pretty well. But, okay, so presupposition number one, and this is a presupposition that, first of all, here's the core argumentation. The transcendental deduction, as I have said before, is a powerful form of argumentation being dramatically underutilized by the Christian community, being dramatically underutilized by the scientific community too, by the way. X is a necessary precondition of Y therefore X. Why is it so important? Because it is a way of proving for the thing that is not available for empirical investigation. Oh! And it's a powerful form of argumentation, a legitimate one. Gödel's incompleteness theorem is a form of transcendental deduction. Kant made them famous, the transcendental deductions. We go a different place than Kant. Why? Because we do. Kant, I won't go into this, it gets too complicated. The caveat with presupposition at the high levels, you've got to try and simplify it. Most people don't know the philosophy, so the less you go into the core philosophy, the better usually. Now, presuppositions are really important. In general, okay, here's a presupposition, a baseline assumption that everybody makes, and it's for the exact same reason the presuppers say. You all, every one of you listening to me included, we presuppose, we assume the reality of the external world. When my wife comes and talks to me, I actually make a baseline assumption. Why? It's the precondition of intelligibility, that's an actual human being there with other ideas and other minds in play. When she says stuff, she's thinking stuff up in her pretty little head on her own. She's being influenced by me for sure. You do what I say, sweetheart, or else. Or my name ain't Craig Reed. She's being influenced by me, but the things that she's cooking up in her pretty little head with her pretty little face are her own ideas. She's an independent person operated. That's a baseline assumption that we all make. Without it, we drift into solipsism. Why do we make it? It's a precondition of intelligibility. Other than that, the world you inhabit makes no sense at all and can't be made sense of. Now, if you don't know that, that's a core thing in philosophy. I can literally prove that. I shouldn't have to. Every one of you should either know that or recognize the truth of that immediately. Another core presupposition. This one gets a little bit more, this one is actually pretty interesting in favor of the theist. Science. In order to get science off the ground, there is a baseline assumption, a baseline presupposition that every scientist makes ever, And that is to presuppose we assume the regularities of nature. What does it mean? It means when I boil water and find out that water boils at whatever 120 degrees Fahrenheit today, I assume it's going to hold true tomorrow, even though there is no empirical justification for it. Why? Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. It's a baseline assumption that every scientist makes. Why? Without it, science will degrade into unintelligibility too. It's absolutely necessary. Necessary what? Necessary precondition of intelligibility, just like the presuppers say. So you've got two core baseline assumptions. There are others, but just work with those two. Why? They're powerful and they're real. And if need be, I could prove them to anybody. I shouldn't have to. If you do not know that about science, I just schooled you. Go watch Dave Rowland's. Dave Rowlands has a good article on it that will explain it in depth. He does a really good job of it. Science, the whole entire endeavor of science, is predicated on a core assumption called the regularities of nature. Hume went into this in his problem of induction. You've heard of the black swan fallacy. If you see a whole bunch of white swans, it is normal for you to go, well, all swans are white. Why? I've never seen a black one. Then you see a black one. Uh-oh. The whole of the scientific endeavor is predicated on what? The presupposition, the assumption of the regularities of nature. Now, that's a doozy of a presupposition that I would say already heavily favors the theist. That's a fact. Okay, that's a fact. If you don't believe me or you don't accept that, you just don't know the philosophy. Go investigate. I promise you that's the truth, and I can prove it. I shouldn't have to. Go read Dave's article on it. Some people talk about it different ways. You may have heard it differently. Dave used the word faith. I won't use that word. Well, Christian, not allowed to. Christian can't use the word. It's faith. You said faith. I told you. Now, where the presupper goes, okay, this is where it gets a little bit dicier. The strongest possible philosophical version of the presuppositional apologetic is the one that Jay Dyer runs. Everyone's going, Jay Dyer, ha, so stupid. He's actually a really good philosopher. If he's not your cup of tea, watch Patristic Faith. Same verse, same core ideas, just as intelligent, a lot mellower, a lot easier for people to not go, oh my God, you should see what happened with Timothy Job. Usually atheists fall apart when you say his name. But the argument that he makes, the only downside to it, I think it's a legit argument. It's pretty darn strong. The only downside is too complicated and most people don't understand it. There are 12 transcendental categories. They trace back to Kant and Aristotle. The Christian metaphysic, the Christian worldview, particularly the Trinitarian Eastern Orthodox in his telling, but it's actually the Trinity, is a more coherent metaphysic to make sense of and coherently explain the 12 transcendent categories. In his hands, it's a decent argument. The weakness of it as presented by him is too complicated. Most people don't know what he's talking about. Honestly, most people have no idea what he's talking about, including really smart people. And very few people, there's a cool conversation with him and Stefan Molyneux, where actually Stefan Molyneux asks him questions and unpacks it and tells you pretty much the normal objections to it. Now, here are the core problems with presupper arguments. The first presupposition that is a precondition of intelligibility. Baseline assumption, we all make the reality of the external world. That's a fact. Okay, the second one I mentioned, there are others, but these are the two important ones. We presuppose the regularities of nature. See, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to chisel this down as something simple. The complex version of the presupp argument is really good. Okay, he goes into a complicated version on the one versus the many, how there's a dialectical tension between them that need not exist. Like I said, probably lost a lot of people right then and there. And how the Trinity resolves the tension between the one and the many. The one and the many can never be resolved because on the one, you say life is all one. Everything is one. Ooh, everything is one. And then you have the many, which is basically your empiricist to some degree. It's all flux. It's all material. It's all chaos and matter and motion. And his argument is, and if he cleaned it up, his argument could probably be a game changer in and of itself. The problem is too complicated. Most people don't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't really coherently explain how the Christian metaphysic resolves the tension. I think it's a good argument. I don't think it's good enough to present to an atheist and them go, aha, I see the light. I'm a Christian now. Here the tile's correct. But it's on the right path. So let's keep analyzing. I'm going to analyze this right out in public. Nothing up my sleeve. I'm not playing any gimmick. Not relying on trapping an atheist and getting you to say stupid things. You do enough of that on your own. You do enough. You don't need me to trap you to say stupid things. You do that just fine by yourself. You're doing that just fine. Dave, you're saying a lot of stupid things without my help. Thank you, Greg. You're welcome. You're doing just fine. You're doing good at that department. No, he had some. What movie was he telling me to see? It was funny. We've all agreed Bullet Train. If action movies are your thing, those sort of like hyper violent, Kill Bill type movies. It's like a Quentin Tarantino flick, or what's the one with Keanu Reeves. It's like that, hyper violent, a lot of funny lines. It's fun. Bullet Train. It's on Netflix. It's pretty good. We both agree it's entertaining. I give it a solid B, maybe even a B plus. I really thought it was fun. The guy keeps talking about seeing the show Train. It's fun. It's funny. I thought it was a good movie. So, what's the difference? Okay, so we've got two baseline assumptions that everybody makes. That's the core difference. This is where the argument needs to be worked on by the presuppositional apologetic. They say God is the precondition of intelligibility, or sometimes belief in God. Here's the problem. Okay, I just mentioned an atheist, Dave Rollins. His worldview is to some degree intelligible. He has knowledge. He doesn't believe in God. Therefore, it doesn't hold in all cases. The two I mentioned hold in all cases. Okay, that's a big difference if you think about it. That's the tension that needs to be resolved. If I can find a way to meaningfully resolve that, I may actually have the game changer argument. Okay, did you understand what I just said? The first baseline assumption I told you about is the reality of the external world. Every single solitary person listening to me makes that baseline assumption. Why? The reason the presuppers say is the precondition of intelligibility. Without that baseline assumption, your life devolves into absolute meaningless chaos, incoherence. You couldn't make sense of anything. It would devolve into solipsism. The second baseline assumption that every scientist makes is the regularities of nature. So that's a baseline assumption that all scientists make. The difference when you move it to God is that we got a lot of people floating around, let's call them, let's say atheists, let's call them atheists, who don't believe in God. And yet don't seem to be lacking anything in terms of them making an intelligible sense of the world. So they change the argument to they don't have a justification for their knowledge, which is okay as an argument. That's where Jay Dyer goes. You don't have a real justification. The Christian metaphysic makes a coherent explanation for these transcendental categories that all fit together. It's a good argument. Maybe it's good enough. If it's reworked into something really simple, maybe it's good enough to get you over the finish line. I don't know. That's where I'm going with it. I don't know. I'm not sure yet. I'm still toying with it. But that's the core of the more philosophically robust version of the presuppositional apologetic. We have 12 transcendental categories. You have things like the laws of logic, mathematical axioms, reality of the past, the mysterious I that I talked about. Oh, I didn't mention that yet, did I? And they're all baseline assumptions that cannot be empirically verified for. Why do we know they are? Because they're preconditions of intelligibility. Now, can we put the Christian God into the same way? That's the difference, is that not every person believes in the Christian God. So we might not be able to successfully argue that it's the precondition of the intelligibility. We could potentially argue that it is the only robust justification or coherent explanation that these things have intelligibility, potentially. So we'll see. We'll see where we get to. But I guess that's all I will go through for now. I think there's real value in it. And I don't think that we should make any distinct categories between presuppositional apologetics and evidentiary apologetics. Like I said, or I may have mentioned, basically where we are right now with atheists is in a stalemate, and we've been there for some time. That is why when I did that William Lane Craig thing, you saw all the atheists' head fell off when William Lane Craig looked like he made a flub. Why? Because we're in a stalemate. And atheists know it. They won't tell you it, but they know it. That's where the chest thumping comes from. All the chest thumping, oh, Christianity is so irrational and so dumb. They know that that's not true. And they know that there's no really good argument to make somebody move from belief, a strong, robust, healthy Christian belief, to atheism, it's literally almost impossible to do. It's easy with fundamentalist Christianity. Why? Because they predicate their things on they build their house on sand. Things that may not be true. If you think about it, I have no idea if the Exodus actually happened, guys. No idea. I'm totally agnostic. But if that's fundamental to your Christianity, okay, they prove that it didn't happen, you're in trouble. You're in trouble already. Why? Because you're already nervous. They can get inside your head and rattle your cage really easily. If your faith, you can believe the Bible's inerrant, but I would not put all my eggs in that basket. Why? Because then when they start going, look, this is potentially a contradiction, you'll get nervous. You'll get nervous and try to stop them from saying it. Stop saying it. Don't put it out. That's what the problem is. That's why they keep pretending like they've got really strong arguments. Why? Because certain types of Christians they can decimate. Because those Christians have predicated their belief structure on things that may not be actually true. I'm not saying the Bible is or is not inerrant. I think it's really hard to justify. And some of those contradictions are hard to explain away. And that's what you have to do if that's what your faith is actually predicated on. So you should not predicate your faith on the proposition that the Bible's inerrant. Why? Because it's going to make you weak. Then you have to argue for that. And it's literally almost impossible to win that argument. I think my faith is on the thing that is the most robust. Did everyone see the Tyler Vila? Did you see Tyler Vila? What did he actually say? Why did he potentially deconstruct? Because he goes to his prayer closet and comes up with blanks. He was looking for comfort in a time of need and didn't find it. Do you know how many Christians could probably say the same thing? A lot. Can I say that? No. If I were going to the prayer closet and coming up with blanks, guess what? I'd probably be agnostic too. I am not. I'm going to the prayer closet and coming up with really powerful experiences that happen almost daily, actually daily. And in my times of need, I found enormous comfort, constant comfort. Now, the thing I'll say in his favor is his divorce with his wife. As some of you may know from listening to my videos, I could never handle it. And I don't know how I would take that. I honestly don't. I have enormous sympathy for that. Outside of my walk with the Lord, my spiritual experiences, my wife is everything. Literally almost everything. I got my religion, my wife, my cat. That's it. It's all I need. It's all I care about. But that's really all I care about, honestly. So I don't even know where I'd be. But that's what he said was the main thing. He was going into the prayer closet and coming up blanks. Now, I could easily teach Tyler Vila or anybody listening to me how to go into the prayer closet and come up with tangible experiences that bring you peace of mind. I do it every day of my life. It's easy. The only thing that would be hard for Tyler Vila is probably having to unlearn something he thinks is true of Christianity in general. He probably got some weird sort of thing that he thinks is synonymous with Christianity that isn't. Other than that, it should be easy to teach. It's easy for me to learn. It should be easy for me to teach. And if you're an atheist listening to me, I can teach anybody, including Aaron Ra, how to have really powerful and compelling religious and spiritual experiences. You might not believe they're God. That's fine with me. My sister's had powerful ones. I've dragged her to church. They were so powerful that tears came to her eyes on New Year's Eve. Literally. Is she a Christian now? No, not really. Well, how does she rationalize it? I don't know. Don't care. I could teach anybody to have those powerful experiences. Why? This is really easy to do. But there's a methodology behind it. That's what Tyler Vila didn't know. That's what I'm telling you. And the methodology is non-negotiable. You can want to have an experience as much as you want. Till you're blue in the face. You can even cry and scream and tears in your eyes. If you don't know how to do it, it ain't going to happen. It's like a flow experience. Everybody heard of flow experience? Same idea. You can't have a flow experience except on the flow experience's terms. You cannot have a spiritual experience except on the terms which produce the spiritual experience. You can't. There's no other way. There's no way around it. So you can want to experience God giving you comfort as much as you want. You can even desperately want it with every fiber of your being. If you don't know how to accomplish it, it won't happen. There's a methodology to it, and the methodology is non-negotiable. So I've said a lot in this video, so I'll let it go. But that's why I started going into presups. With Tyler Vila, it's a little more confusing. He said he's still a theist and a classical theist. Not sure what he means. If he's still a Platonic realist who believes in, I use some of his arguments because I think his philosophy was really pretty good. And as a philosopher, I thought he was really good. So I guess I'll still be using his arguments. I don't know. He doesn't believe in God anymore. I don't care. I think he still does believe in God. I'm not sure really where he's at. But anyways, with that, I will wrap her up. Another successful video, another slam dunk, if you ask me. That is all for now. The Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.